Yeah.
There are significantly more people online. Thanks for those who have joined online.
Lovely.
I'll post I said I would do a SACLAP CPD points attendance register. I'll post that online. Thank you all for joining our school talk today. I think this might actually be one of the last ones for the semester. And I just want to introduce Ankia Bormans, who is our speaker for today. Ankia is a graduate of the school and hires many graduates from our school and has also maintained a good connection, I think, through teaching in the landscape architecture program. Also in architecture, you've taught in the architecture undergrad program with Tana. Was that last year even?
It was last year, yeah.
Yeah, so Ankia is a familiar face and is going to present some of the work that she's doing as the principal landscape architect and director at Terra Landscape Architects.
That's right. Thanks.
Thank you, Ankia.
Thank you very much. Apologies for the camera that's grey, but when you have a presenter that's over 50, I guess that's what happens. Even if it wasn't color, I'm still grey. So today, I'm just going to share with you what it means to have a dialogue as landscape architects. So that hence the name, Landscape Dialogue, because it is a dialogue with many facets to it. It's dialogue within the office. It's dialogue with other professionals. Sometimes you take over projects from other landscape architects and you've got to set up a dialogue for that. And then there is the dialogue with the landscape itself, which we constantly have, right? As the project progresses, or as the site changes, or as the terms change, or the scope changes, that dialogue changes as well. The projects that I'm going to show you today, I'm going to have to go through them quickly because I've got about 77 slides. Is Bonteheuwel Town Square, Station Arcade in Parow, Muizenberg Beachfront. There's another one, Park the Cup, that came in as a little bit of a late one that we brought in at Westridge Park. These are all projects that were largely commissioned by the City of Cape Town, and I use that specifically because it illustrates quite well how you have to kind of negotiate all the aspects of community, of constraints, of material constraint, of site constraint, with decent budgets. They have decent budgets, but it is really about a community project at the end of the day, which is the forward going, which is the one. Which one? Okay, not doing it. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so the team, I don't know, you've probably met some of them. Maria's examined here, Michael has taught here, Neil is in my office, Penny has taught here, myself and Monde, and we all make one big team, and Sokis, who sadly has passed away, who was the office cat, but is no more. The first project that I'm going to talk about is Barrow Station Arcade, and I chose this project specifically because there's no soft landscaping in it. It is largely a hard landscaping project, and that's interesting because we always kind of think that landscape architects should come and plant the trees, which we're often told. But no, this was a project where the whole Station Arcade up to Voortrekker Road down to the station was redone or revamped or reimagined. It's a pedestrian corridor with traders in it and buildings on either side, stormwater issues, lighting issues, trader bays that needed to be accommodated. And those were the issues that we had to deal with. There was trade that we had to accommodate, seatings, and then there are obvious obstacles that you have to deal with because you're dealing in a public space. So it really is about responding to that space. And we did this by defining the space and creating spaces that could become legible for pedestrians. So it really is about creating those textures and colors and patterns to define certain public spaces. There were significant intersections, and each of these intersections then had a specific way of dealing with the paving and with the seating. So you can see some trees there. Unfortunately, those have fallen by the wayside because we couldn't get a water connection or irrigation to the trees. So that is one of the constraints that happens. But you'll see that there are, I mean, is there a little pointer here that I can point? I don't know. It's the pointer there. There we go. So there you'll see that there are trailer bays that we had to accommodate in the space. There's bollards that we had to accommodate, and then there's paving that happens along and lighting that needed to be accommodated. So the plan actually became quite diagrammatic, and the execution of it then had to start happening in the paving itself. This is just one of the plans, just to show you what these type of plans then start looking like, the concept development of it, and then the paving patterns that we then designed to create the identity of each of these spaces, which is quite exciting to do. What is nice about this, and what is great about this, is that it shouldn't cost anything more to create something interesting, because the paver is a paver is a paver, right? It costs the same whether you lay it in one straight plain paving or whether you actually start creating patterns with it. There's some implementation, so hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be able to go to Station Arcade and actually experience these patterns all along Station Arcade as you walk from the train station up to Floatricker Road. And then there are mistakes when the contractor does take their own initiative and they decide that they're going to do the paving themselves and they pull you to site. They were supposed to put the stormwater grade in line with the stormwater channel. Right? We deal with it though. That's part of being a landscape architect, is to take a deep breath, go to site, and then calmly explain to them that that is just something that cannot happen. The next project was a private project. The resident, it's here on the campus. It's a housing for students. There used to be tennis courts there with a strong heritage aspect to it, so that we often do in our office. We have a lot of projects that have a crossover to heritage and heritage issues that you have to deal with. So how do you deal with an urban heritage kind of constraint? And there's another set of dialogues that you have to enter into with a heritage consultant, where they start setting up certain indicators and certain guidelines that they would like to see represented either in the landscape. And you've got to be responsive to that and start looking at the landscape in a heritage, critical heritage aspect. This was cited in, you all know where this is. I'm sure some of you might have friends that stay there. And this was the early concept plan that I did for it, where these blocks of housing were given. These houses here were a response to that form, and then that type of landscape had to be responsive to the streetscape as well. And there were certain elements that had to be kept there, certain existing trees that had to be kept, and an existing wall that had to be kept, and a huge big existing oak that had to be retained here. The site was quite dramatic because it's very, very condensed and high density in a sense on a very small site, so it had to be excavated. So this was the original pavilion, and that had to be excavated to allow for the underground parking, because there's no surface parking on this development. It's all underground parking. So that has its own constraints of planting trees on a roof deck. So that was the plan, and that's it. Looks not very little, but it is actually quite a beautiful little project. It's like a little piece of little jade, and I use it because it has such beautiful moments in it. That is a detail, quite a beautiful detail of the existing wall, the stormwater management that we surfaced, and then the pathway that sits right up against the proposed new building. That's another example of keeping the existing trees, and how do you manage that? How do you manage the soil level? How do you manage the existing walls, and then the new build that sits next to it? And it was quite tight, as you can see, in that space. That all had to happen in that space. Repeat. And there again, the existing trees in the pathway. How do we manage that pathway within the confines of this? So you start loving your engineers. There's another dialogue that you have to enter into. You have to enter into a dialogue with your civil engineer. And you have to enter into a dialogue quite early with your structural engineer, because they are critical if you want certain things to happen. They're critical for you to be able to create spaces that you have imagined, and you've got to make friends with them, and then ultimately you've got to make friends with your contractor. You cannot be too horrible to them, because they are actually going to make things happen for you. There's some images of what that wall looked like, and then what it was after that. That's what it's looking like now. That's what it looked like before. So it was redone completely to keep that heritage wall and that heritage aspect. There's a final picture of it. There's the stormwater system that we daylighted along here, and with the engineers' help, we planted trees in there, we put planting in there, and we kept the existing old oak tree. I don't know, we hope it's not going to die from polyphagus, but it's there. It's not in a great shape, but we kept it. These are before and after pictures of the planting. So between it really was a project of interstitial spaces, really, and what you can do with those interstitial spaces, and how you can make it quite beautiful, and acknowledging that people don't walk in a straight line, right? People walk in a meander. So we kind of brought the meandering quality between these buildings, and there's the existing and the planted. There's some pictures of what it looks like now. Quite a rich planting palette, and with lemon trees, which are, I'm told, being used regularly, and avo trees by the students. So many gin and tonic is being drunk, I think, in this resident. There's just an example of the plant mix. And then how do you deal with the courtyard, and how do you plant on courtyard, and how do you convince your structural engineer that you want this and that they must make it happen for you. And so you start developing that. There's a dialogue that you have with your structural engineer on how you're going to penetrate that slab, and how you're going to bring the irrigation up, and how you're going to have inspection holes for the full bore, and all of that, just to make this happen. So this is it's a good example of a project which was private funded, limited budget, but still allowing to take all the constraints that we had and making something quite special. And because of this project, their leasing or their rental is almost 100%, because all the parents that come in here look at it and go, yeah, that's a great space for our children to be. Because when you're going at 6,000 rands, right, as a student, which you are most of the time, the best way to bring the rents down is to go and sit under a tree or go and sit outside in nature. There's, I suppose, lots of research on it. I'm not going to bore you with this. This is another private project that we did called Plug the Cup, and the reason why I chose this, because there was a dialogue of an old landscape with a new landscape. So we were called in to do a framework plan for the whole Plug the Cup. I don't know if you know where it is. You probably won't ever see what it looks like inside, but these horrible buildings. On the outside, these real 80s monoliths. And yet when you go inside, it's populated by people, and people access the spaces in between these buildings. And they asked us to look at the framework plan for it and to reimagine their gardens for them, which was planted at that time quite a monoculture of agapanthus and diabetes. And we went further at this stage. We're not only going to look at that, but we're going to look at how people move through that space. So how can we make it so that lunchtime, when people move from the one building to the cafeteria at the bottom, and they have to navigate all the streets and the roads and the cars, how can we make it so that they actually feel more comfortable and the cars feel slightly less comfortable? And we did that by introducing a paving band that actually recognizes the pedestrian and how people cross there. People don't cross. At the pedestrian crossing, they cross diagonally across the space. So that was the very first thing that we introduced, and they were a little bit shocked that we would actually suggest that we carve into their paving and change the paving, because that's not what we were appointed for. But we felt that that was actually quite a strong and important element that had to be introduced. And then obviously also we're introducing the planting and creating a planting palette that's a little bit close to the environment of the context. And the planting arrangement is not as strictly geometric as it used to be. It's a little bit more mixed, so that you get a kind of a wilder garden feel. That was the planting palette that we presented to them, which they liked, all the colors. They wanted red, blue, and white because of metropolitan colors. And the others, the insurance company, they had these, and we presented, they were quite happy with this. And these were the existing kind of painted pedestrian crossings, and we just introduced a paving band that goes across them. So there you can see there's still a remnant of the existing. And I mean, we're not going to take it out, that must just fade away. And this is the introduction of the new diagonal across the street. And it has slowed traffic down significantly. So there you can see a little detail of it. I'm bringing in the technical drawings so that you can see that there is a reason that one actually has to do them, because you also convey and speak quite a lot of information through a technical drawing, and they don't have to be dull, and they can actually be beautiful. And there's a little detail of it. It seems quite simple. It seems kind of low-key, but it is actually worth looking at. So you can see another technical drawing of that pathway, and then 5 crosses. And there's an example of where it is installed. So we just narrowed the whole roadway and gave the pedestrians the space to walk within the street. There's another example of a very simple detail, but if you don't draw it, right, they're not going to build it. And there's an example of the planting palette that changed, became more seasonal, became more kind of colorful and less structured. Different textures. Okay, the next one I think you've looked at in your studies is Born-to-Level Center Upgrade. The reason why I chose this is because I had a dialogue with the previous landscape architect, which was Tana, that did the drawings and took the project up to into stage 3. In stage 2, halfway through stage 3, and we then took over from that. Now, normally, it sometimes doesn't work because not two architects, landscape architects, would necessarily want to enter into a dialogue or want to talk to each other. But in this case, Tana and I have a great synergy in our thinking. I respect Tana hugely. She was my mentor when I did my master's, so I think she'll forever be my mentor. And we took those drawings and we added to them and we reinterpreted them, and we kept some of the elements, and some of the elements we tweaked a bit, and some of the elements we had to change. And that's how Born-to-Level Center Upgrade really came to be, because
you on the talk today. She's talking about landscape, and she's talking.
I don't know who I'm talking to. Okay, Christine. You mute her. I mean, she's welcome to enter into the dialogue if she knows something about it. But this was very interesting because there was obviously the dialogue with the city, the dialogue with the community, the dialogue with Tana, and taking this project further and realize. So that's where our role was. And it became a very beautiful project. We're very proud of it. Whether it's also there is debatable, but it has got some merit. So that is what it was before. That was the library steps. That was the Eden steps. That was the historic or heritage element which you have to recognize and give its own importance. And then the rest was all tarmac next to the city buildings. And that is what it became. So we reinterpreted this portion of it, the steps and brought in another kind of geometry. Yeah, there were some changes to it. You can look at the old plans and the new plans, but there were changes to it. What was also introduced here, which was another element of dialogue, is the discussion that we had with Lorenzo Nazibeni, who's an artist. So there was an artistic component to it, and he ran a whole workshop with the children of Waterhevel and prepared a number of slides and a number of drawings, and then realized that these are early concept drawings that we did, and then realized that in a number of artworks around the square. So I'm just showing these concept drawings that because you have to show the city something, and was just about using that color and how that color can be brought into the square with artwork, whether it be in the paving or whether it be something that happens on the wall. And it doesn't always have to be a mural. It can be something that is paving that doesn't have to cost anything more, because it's still just a paver, right? That's what happened in Para. It's just taking that utilitarian object and really making it something quite spectacular and quite unusual. It's just imagine drawings, and then that was the last final plan. Again, it's a technical drawing, just to show you that they can achieve it quite evocative and beautiful. There's some images of the artwork that Lorenzo did and how we repeated that in very simple objects that are robust play equipment. That doesn't have to be the most expensive play equipment. It doesn't have to be made out of the most expensive material, but it's robust and it's being used. Then Lorenzo did a 3D of the artwork components. So there was an artwork component in the floor of the big circular or ellipse gathering space, and artwork along these routes that take you to the library. Images of. So you can see the artwork of the library right to the back. And that was the artwork proposal for the screen, security screen. So it's a security screen that functions as a security screen, that is a utilitarian object, but these elements were introduced to make it playful and create a piece of art that is based on the drawings, I think, that are on view or framed and in the library that all the kids did. So it was a lovely process that he took on. There's an example of it. Musenberg beachfront upgrade. Now, when you run a practice like mine, we're like a family of people in a sense. And they each have their own project. So this project is run by Penny. You all know Penny. She's giving you plants and design. She runs it in my office, and there's constant dialogue between me and her about what happens there, and we touch base. I don't necessarily have to go to the project every single time, but there has to be kind of a sense of involvement. But Penny has been running this project. And it started with, our scope was to look at this beachfront. And there were certain constraints. The parking had to stay here, and the engineers designed the seawall to manage the erosion of the sand. So again, there was quite a big dialogue between what the engineer elements are, what the paving elements are, who does what, coastal engineers that designed the steps. We had input on what the materiality of that would be, what the surface finish would be. So there's, again, a whole conversation that one has to have. And you, in a sense, you have to, at some point, let go of a certain amount of your ego and sit down and actually accept that there's certain constraints that you can't change and certain things that you can. Or you start deciding what you want to fight for. And then you do go into a more robust dialogue with your other consultants. This is just the paving extent, but there's a lot of it. But we still have input into this. So it doesn't have to be a boring asphalt parking lot. We can make it something that actually looks a little bit nicer. This was the soft landscaping extent. Certain elements again were heritage elements that had to be kept, and certain elements we had a little bit more free rein with. And then the concept really was obviously it's next to the coast, these waves and paving and wave patterns and patterns that what you can do with that. And again, we express that in the paving. So there's surface fauna that had to stay in the way they wanted surface fauna to remain as surface fauna. We looked at some playful elements in the play equipment. These are early sketches that a previous person that worked for me, Alma, did in the office, looking at how you can extrude it into play equipment from an anemone. So we had an octopus, and we've got sea kelp. So that is another way of getting a playful element in. And again, I don't think one should go out and buy bespoke play equipment that is made in a special way. I think we can use basic elements. So we used the elements that you would normally get in play equipment that is easy to access, easy to work with, easy for a contractor to do, because you've got to bear in mind, these projects, when they go out to tender, they go out to tender to a contractor who's not a play equipment contractor. They are basic contractors that need to be able to do all of this. That was the central node. You'll probably start seeing a lot of this happening. The beach, the sea wall is being implemented, and all of this will be done fairly soon. And paving patterns again, here's just another way of using paving patterns that are playful. And these do get drawn out in a DWG so that they can be set out on site. Because I'm not going to trust anybody to do this. I have to put it on a drawing. If I don't put it on a drawing, they're not going to do it like this. So yeah, there's a bit of you've got to kind of understand that there needs to be you need to be very clear in that dialogue with the contractor. You need to be very clear of what it is that you want. Otherwise, they do what they do in Para, right? And they carry on and they think it's fantastic. This is also just a little playful element of the kelp forest and reimagining that the kelp forest and what it can be. And that's the play area. So that's kind of translates into, again, something that needs to be built, and how do you make it legible for it to be built? And part of this is also to have mosaic works. Mosaic works well because it has no intrinsic value for people. So people don't generally come and steal it or take it off. So this just is going to be on the big waterfowl shower tower and these mosaics are being done as we speak. Westridge Park, I don't know if this is going to be built. This is part of the early education Department of Early Education. They also did EEG, which we were also involved in. And there was an area in Westridge where they wanted to introduce a new building, and then they had this mound that had a walkway on it, but they wanted to reimagine what you could do and have it as an educational walkway. So we got involved in that. And of course, you get involved in the parking and how the parking there should be, and the paving of this walk, and you start integrating it, because you never work in isolation. Right? It started with a little building, but we always kind of stretch it a little bit further of where one can be, because you need to do that. You need to push those edges to understand, to make the client understand that it is part of a broader context and not just in isolation. So this is just a little preview that we did of that walkway as it comes across into the dune, and where it ends with that was a request from the client, with a request sometime. Right. And again, Where do you place seating? What do they look like? What are the views? Where's the wind direction from? And how would this thing function within the landscape? Ending at the building. There's the early concepts or the lookout point. And then you've got to figure it out, right? It's got to sit in the landscape. You've got to figure out what each of these support structures are going to do and what they look like and how they're going to be angled, because they have to kind of have this undulating feel to it. Okay, so that's what we have to work out. We have to work out each of these so that this has an undulated feel, but it sits a certain distance off the ground. And I think that's the end of it. So now I've got about 25 minutes for you to ask questions, because I'm here for you to ask questions. If there's somebody online that has a question, they're welcome to ask me as well. Have you got? I watched through it a bit, but you're welcome to ask me to go back to Project Soul too. Who's got a question?
I have a question.
Yes.
From a design point of view, those paving patterns,
Yes.
like, does it cost to design, not to make, and to make, I suppose?
Okay, from a design point of view in the office, it's an interesting question, that, Christine. It depends how you run your practice. If you run your practice and you allocate hours to a project and it has a cost center and you've got to count the hours and you have to stop someone from doing work that because it's now going to cost you too much. I don't run my practice like that. Okay, so some people do, and that's fine. I don't do that. People that work for me have got one mandate, and that is to produce good work. Yes, sometimes things take longer. Harrow, for example, they wanted removable bollards. We spent a month researching removable bollards, only to have an email yesterday to say, oh, we've decided we're not going to use the removable bollards. Now, I can't tell the client, but now we've got a library of removable bollards and ways to implement them in a public space that will make them fairly robust. And it's not work that is wasted for me. So yes, it does take more time, but I am inclined not to count the hours. So maybe I make less money, but that's just the way I run my practice. Everybody has it differently.
Scope, like that kind of project, in terms of time, like you go, okay, guys, like here's a project, and then I'm assuming you've got to have this there. The city will have some kind of.
Yes, they've got deadlines. June, you've got to have certain things done. December, you've got to have certain things done. And then I've got a fantastic, the principal architect who put the tender together is a wonderful administrator.
Oh.
And if I say to him, listen, we've spent so much more time on it, then your project manager and him sit together and say, okay, we've spent so much time, or if the tender comes back and it has to be redone, we get allocated more hours. Yeah, you've got a scope and you've got a complete deadlines that you've got to do. It's not unlimited. But and the same with private projects. It's not unlimited. Private projects just happen to have a little bit more budget constraints. In a sense, because the client doesn't want to spend any more. Because for them, there's a feasibility attached to it. Where city projects tend to be a little bit, you can let a little bit more imagination fly and introduce a little bit more interesting things that might cost a little bit more, but the value of them are realized because it's a city project. At least that's how I've experienced it. Some people don't like doing city projects because it's a lot of admin. It's a lot of talking and dialogue and sitting down and another meeting and then a meeting with the traders and then the meeting with this. But it's part of that whole holistic package that you get, and then you have a final project that Cruisefell is another one that's involved that goes to the ground, and it's not 100%, and it's not perfect, but it's something that adds a certain amount of value to our public spaces. And that I think is important. To work in the public space for people that have access to something that they would generally not have had access to. I think that's valuable. I think that's valuable. And then it takes more time in your office. But yeah. Yes. Yes.
Spoke about the engineers, like the, yeah, the
Seawalk.
yeah, the people that was like compulsory for you to keep. And I know you spoke about like this previous project where you researched the product. So I have like, when they give you like those restrictions, do you stick to them or do you research and design like, hey, the alternatives that can take them? And then my second question is, as a principal, obviously we have like a team of people.
Yes.
And I'm sure everyone's helping, like you mentioned, the other project was being run by a. So how do you ensure like a level of, keeping the same standard, I guess, because I know everyone has like different ways of finding form and coming up with the design.
Yes.
If you like come together and then do some stuff and then the individual is working, like, that's super random.
No, it's not random. Okay, so all of these projects, this is done by Penny, this project, this Maria ran within the office. This Pharaoh, this was also Maria and myself. She just started with me. This is Maria. Pharaoh was Michael. Where's my Pharaoh now? This is all Michael. Michael's work. So I cannot run Terra Plus on my own. There are people that run practices on their own. I cannot do all of this work on my own. It's just not possible. What I can do is I can facilitate discussion and I can facilitate dialogue in the office, but I hold everybody to a certain standard. Because the only way that I get more work is by producing good work. If you go to my website, I don't have an office mission or a vision. I haven't gone for business coaching or did a whatever. I just expect everybody to produce good work and to be passionate about what it is that they do. And then in the office, we talk about it. We throw the things. I suppose, the office's biggest resource. So when I sit in the office, even though I've got VIAs to do and other things to do, I never really get anything done because there's constant dialogue in the office. There's constant talking. What do you think about this? What shall we do about this? They did this. Ankia, what about? So even Musenberg, although I didn't do the final drawings or even some of the final designs, I had input into them. Right? So it is kind of making yourself available, not to hold the reins too much, to let go of some of the reins and allow people to run with what they want to run with. And then at some point step in and say, okay, I think maybe do it like this, or I think maybe think about this, or I think what shall we do about this? Or it's that constant in between being in control and not being in control. I don't know, you must ask them whether they'll be happy that I'm away for, but I don't know. They can maybe tell you yes, now let them go. I don't know. But that's just how we function in the office. It's not really a hierarchical office in that, where I do all the designs and I give it to them to interpret. No. Because they're all fully fledged landscape architects, right? They all have a master's. For God's sake, who am I to tell them how to skin a cat? And in any case, in any design, if I give this design to anyone, there are millions of ways to get to a solution. There's not just one solution that's the perfect solution. And we don't have to have projects that are like, wow, projects that are like, oh my God, there's like this thing. I don't want my project to be this project that everybody has to go and see. It almost is beautiful if it's just nuanced. If you walk down Station of Penn, you go, oh God, that's a kind of, that's where it really becomes amazing in the public realm. And we've all been there. We've all been in places where we go, there's a designer that was involved here, right? We've all been there. Yes.
With the stormwater drain of residents, how did it do with this big storm impact?
I think quite well. I actually haven't had a look.
Well,
But-
that's obvious.
They haven't, but they wouldn't call.
All that.
No, actually, they would call me, but I don't think it would have been an issue. No.
So I'm
But that's when you start loving your engineer, right? Because they've got to make things happen that you want. You want the sword to be on the surface, right? And your engineer wants desperately to put it in a price. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them. So when you've got an engineer who's kind of the pipe type engineer and you want to daylight it, there's a serious dialogue that you have to have. You almost have to kind of be, and then you've got to come to a compromise. And then it goes, okay, we can do it, but we must do it in armor flex. And I go, okay, we'll do it in armor flex, but we'll put topsoil over it. And you go, no, you want to put topsoil. So, but we want to put trees in it. Okay, so then you start having that. That's where there's a dialogue. But you've got to be able to enter into that dialogue. So you have to kind of, there's a level of putting away your, yes, but I am the designer and I'm telling you what to do. And from their side as well, we have to, there has to be that kind of willingness to talk. Yeah, yes.
Do you get to pick and choose? Do you kind of have engineers and things that you typically go to? Or
I generally
most
don't
projects?
I don't put the project team together.
So you actually follow.
Generally, the planner comes to you and say, I've got this project that we've got to get through city council and I've got the engineer and you do have engineers that you like working with, yes. And you do have engineers that you know, ooh, that's going to be more of a battle. But you work them. You know, you have to work with them. We're never in isolation. That's the thing about landscape architects. We meddle. We meddle with urban designers, we meddle with the architects, we meddle with the engineers. I always say I'm a meddling landscape architect. I stick my finger everywhere. Meddle with all their work and they get irritated and they get annoyed, but ultimately the value is not in getting the biggest tree in. The value is in that kind of small nuanced stuff that you get done.
beachfront newspaper. I know they did a redesign of it. Like the public comments that.
Yes, so there's that dialogue as well. Yes, we were.
Design reports.
Yes, so obviously with public engagement, you get to beachfront. Sorry, I'm flipping through all of these, but there. So yes, there was public engagement. Para had public engagement. Bristol had public engagement. Westridge, don't know if we went to public engagement. Muizenberg had public engagement. And with all of them, we have to take the public comments into account and tweak the design where necessary. So there is another dialogue that you have to enter into and have a discussion and take cognizance of it, because it's not a private project. It's a project that has to serve the people.
So then you redesigned the purpose of it again.
No. And I don't know how many public, I think we had 2 public processes. It depends on the statutory process that it runs, whether how many public processes you. Yeah. If there's an EIA, I think it has 2. If it's just a city public engagement, it's not statutory, then it's just an open house and show the work.
The question of really
Yes.
how do you manage to get the payment contract as a landscape architect? I find architects and engineers tend to get the contract to get involved in very design.
So you've got to read that to me again. How do you manage to get to payment contract? So that is a real dialogue. How do you, as landscape architect, get the paving contract? you meddle, you stick your nose in there, and you say, we are going to be designing all the paving on this project, and we need the fees of the paving. And then the engineer says, no, but we are taking, I said, no, you're not. You're not designing it. You're doing all the sublayers. We're doing the designing of the paving. So then you really have to have a robust discussion with the engineers. And then you always come, it's a bit of a financial negotiation of the percentages, right? But you make sure that you don't step back and just become the person that plants the trees. You have to have a little bit of chutzpah in it. You know, you've got to kind of sit with the project manager and say, this is part of our scope is this. And we are going to be involved there. We're going to be involved here. We need the fees. That is how. With dialogue and discussion. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Thanks, Ankia. I want to be comment about the drawings.
Yes.
Because it's very refreshing, and I think it's very good to think about the nature of the drawing, because this hybrid, they seem to be kind of a hybrid between a construction working drawing and a sketch plan, where you've got color on these very construction type of drawings. And I really think that is great, because I'd like to know from you also just quickly why you do that. But I think what I like about it is it conflates that gap between design and sketch plan production, and then construction happens later by somebody else, or at the end we'll get to it and it's this pain in the butt. But what that does, it really allows you to actually be engaging in a positive way with the precision that's required in the project, because you have to get to that precision early in the design process. You can't do it at the end. So I just think that's really encouraging to use that as inspiration.
So, Linda, to answer you, is that you have to start thinking of how you're going to make it in concept, right? And it shouldn't bug you down. It shouldn't dampen that process. How you're going to make it should be part of the excitement of it. And I struggle with stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I struggle with it, right? For me, it's just one big stage that has to happen. It has to happen. And what has happened with the city, what is interesting with the city is the end of their stage 3. Before they've got a stage 3, which they call stage 4, 1A. Lovely bureaucrats. Love them. But what it meant was that stage 4, 1A, before we went into the tender, we had to produce drawings that were fairly constructible. And it pushed us to fairly early on start thinking about, so our stage 3 actually became kind of at the end of stage 3, we had to have drawings that you could, in theory, because we have to go through a stage gate at the city, they needed to understand that the nuts and bolts would work, because the stage gate is run by, oh, this is bureaucratic stuff, but the stage gate is run by a whole bunch of engineers. There's not one single landscape architect. And they look at that project and they go, can this work as a project? And for that, they need drawings that were fairly accurate. And then to then produce a drawing that one could actually build from, because then when you get to stage 4, you dimension it a little bit and you put it into a tender, and then off it goes in working drawings. So from stage 3, 4, 5, those drawings just get augmented to construction drawings, but they're not. So you have to, at stage 3 detailed design, you actually have to start thinking about what it looks like, and earlier on even, what is it going to look like? And the only way you can do that is by plan section, detailed back. It's that circular drawing that you do the whole time. If you keep on flipping now, but if you look at these drawings, some of these drawings, in the corner there, they have little details in the movie of what it's going to be, what is that going to be, what's that going to be, what's that going to be. And these are early bump drawings, but they kind of you start looking at those details early on already. And then the other thing in the office, which some people in my office are less inclined to do, but I think is important, is you have to use your details. You've got to flex all your work that you've done in the office, and you've got to really use it. Using big beachfront, the idea of using the beachfront paving can be applied. We did a project, Harbour Arch, we did the floor of Harbour Arch, we'd had a pattern similar to this. And we just simply used some of that material and okay, you adapt it to this project, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time you do something. Again, at UCT level, I mean, you have a new project every single time. But you've got to have a library. You've got to build up your own library. If you work in Europe, you've got a library that you buy. Here, you don't have that because we've got certain constraints, but that makes you think differently. It makes you flexible in your thinking. To not have this library that you can just pull from. You've got to build up your own library and details. So if I were you, I would start building up that library now. Typical details. Yes.
Are you using Revit or?
Revit's not designed for landscape architects. I run my office on Mac, so Revit doesn't fit to that platform. We use AutoCAD, SketchUp, hand drawings. I use the iPad a lot. And we go cross media a lot. So I would sometimes draw things by hand. And then Michael takes it and does beautiful Photoshop sections of it and reworks it. And so, I mean, there's a wealth of information that if you want to, you can go onto our website and you can go and look at some of the work that other work that we've done. Or if you want, you can say to me, Ankia, I'm really interested in this project. Can I come and sit and I can show you some of the work that goes with this. I can't show you everything. Yeah.
I have a different question. It's about if you're employing people in your office
Yes.
and you're not necessarily employing somebody with experience, somebody fresh out of university, what do you consider as looking for in terms of, employability?
Sure. Okay, I think. No, you can quote me. I think they must have certain technical proficiency. For them to add value to the office, I must be able to give them some work to do. So they must be able to work well in AutoCAD or have a SketchUp proficiency. But having said that, I think somebody who's just willing to learn is also valuable. So that if I give them a bill of quantities to do, which I don't expect anybody to necessarily know how to do, because every office does it differently to a certain extent. They must be able to take something that's an example in the office, a good example in the office, and be able to apply their mind. So there needs to be a certain level of lateral thinking, of application of a certain amount of knowledge. That for me is important. And that I expect of somebody that's done a master's, right, is to be able to apply their base knowledge to a problem that I'm giving them. And if it means that they don't know how to draw it, there are 3 people in my office, 4 people in my office, 5 people in my office, who are really, really proficient in AutoCAD and who's willing to give you a tip and sit down. But if you sit there and you close and you don't apply the knowledge base that you've got to a particular problem, then yeah, you're not going to get very far. And then I expect them to do good work, Clinton. It really is about that. If they're not happy with the work that they've given me, why? How do they expect me to be happy with it? So there's that level of Yeah, but the application of your knowledge is important. Yes.
Jen, do you friends coming through and everybody wants to do, well, I want to do paving like this, or I want to do these type of flowers. I mean, out of interest, like you just see trends coming and going.
We all look at land design, come on. We've all wanted to do like the red ribbon through the landscape. We all wanted to do the disappearing water next to us. We've all, of course.
But I mean, do you get, I mean, so I guess the point is like, do you, like, can't you get influenced overly by it, but you kind of,
No.
people say like, oh, I really saw this, we want this. Kind of like,
My answer normally to a client that says that is that we really need to look at the context of whether the context allows for it, right? And then the cost. They all want water and steel. Not all have water and steel.
Sorry, I'm interested in guys who partner with romance. Downstairs and romance will be,
No, we're not downstairs from that.
oh, no, that's it. It's great.
In Woodstock. Where do you think
There was, I went to a studio what's doing. They have a symbol in their window that looks like it says Terra head.
Oh, you know who that is? That's a furniture design, interior design company, Terra.
Yes, yes. So that,
They came after us.
yeah. Do the. That was like the symbol.
It doesn't matter, there can be 50 Terras, I mean, you always get the right person in the end. I can't put a trademark to my name. Yeah.
I'll question on
Yes, question number?
It's stakeholder engagement, usually within your team proposal.
Yes. 100%. Yeah, hours for that. They are involved and they are exhausting, but they're very fruitful. They can be very fruitful. Yeah.
In all your work, like years of working and having prepared, what would you say was like your favorite project in APG and why?
It's like asking me which child I like the most. I can't answer that. I haven't got a favorite child. Okay. No, maybe. So one of my favorite projects that I did, it was quite early on in my practice, fairly early on, was to formalize a path between an informal settlement and a bus stop, between pine trees. I think our fees on that was 1,800 rand. And the budget was. But it could have been just a tarmac path, but it wasn't because we got involved in the paving bands and the impact on the community of that little path was just, it was just changed the way people go to work. They could go to work in their normal shoes and get to the bus stop when it's stopping rain and it's raining. They had a surface to walk on. So that for me really was something that kind of left quite an impact on the minimal impact with a maximum kind of change and evolution of space. My least favorite project, I don't have a least. I would say one of my housing projects, housing gardens. I don't have many. I have done 2 in my practice. And it's not my least favorite project, but it's not a project that but that's a discussion that I can have offline. Don't think I must talk about that because you get frustrated.
Project to resonate.
Not what you resonate. No, it's not what you resonate. No. So it doesn't, but there are landscape objects that resonate with that type of thing. So as future landscape architects, there is a point in your life because your career as a landscape architect starts now. It does not start when you've registered for SATLAB or when you've got your first paycheck. It starts now. And there is something to be said for positioning yourself as a landscape architect. What is it that resonates with you? What is it that you love so much that when you do that work, it doesn't feel like work at the end of the day. And that's a sweet spot to get to, because it means that you will never actually feel like you work. But there are projects that resonate with me more, and but they all have their challenges. Don't think that Para hasn't had its challenges, or Crystal hasn't had its challenges, or Music with Richmond or Waterford didn't have its challenges that you want to pull your hair out. But you have to take it as a whole person. When you meet somebody and you fall in love with them, you can't say, oh yes, I really love their eyes, but you know what, their lips. I don't know if I can, you've got to love the whole person, because they come with warts and all. And that's the same with projects. They come with all sorts of constraints, but it actually, in the end, it's part of that whole package. You're going to go, bye, Clinton. Okay, any other questions online? Shall we wrap up? It's 2:05.
Ankia, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
That was
My pleasure. Goodbye.
dress code.
Where did Maria put her name up?
It was just for a second, just to ask you, who's your favorite in the office?
Ola. Ola is my favorite.